Welcome back to another edition of Couch Cruisers. I know it's been a while, but I owe you guys a good video after the disaster that was my attempt at live action camping videos. Today's episode stems from the fact that I'm tired of going to work. Getting up early stinks, showering before I'm awake stinks, driving to work stuck in traffic stinks, sitting in a cubicle stinks. My coworker Chris's farts definitely stink. You get the idea. Ready for a change. Being a big fan of look before you leap philosophy, this video is to figure out how much cash I need to implement my cruising plans. My goal is to cruise full-time for 7 years. My boat selections are based upon that and having a family of 3. Your situation is probably different, with different requirements and different costs. If you just want to day sail, you can get a massively less expensive boat. Hopefully, my methodology for arriving at my estimate startup costs are beneficial for you when you come up with your own magic sail away number. With the objective of cruising and living aboard a boat for 7 years, I have 4 main things I need to consider when arriving at the cost estimate for doing so. First, how much will it cost to purchase and outfit a boat? Then, how much will it cost for living expenses per month? Then, after the cruise, how much will it cost to resume life on land? And finally, how much do I want to keep in reserve as an emergency fund? Some of these figures were very easy to come up with. For living expenses, I just researched about 10 people living on boats, living the dream already, and averaged their monthly budget. 2,000 to 3,000 seems about average, so I picked the middle of that, 2,500 a month or 3,000 per year. For returning to land and for emergency funds, I just took 1 year's estimated cost and said that's enough to return to land. For 1 year's estimated cost, you can at least do 6 months on land with renting an apartment, getting a cheap car, and finding a job. That should give you 6 months worth of time. An emergency fund, everywhere you look, they'll tell you you should have 6 months to a year's worth of expenses saved up for that. That takes us to the boat, where it's a little bit more challenging to come up with a plan. I'm sure you've been to Yacht World and see boats range anywhere from $100 to hundreds of millions of dollars. I need a system to narrow down that range and figure out what boat would work for me and what would that boat cost. The system I landed on and what I used for this video to estimate the startup cost of purchasing a cruising boat is I took the list price and then I added 1% of the list price per year of age of the vessel and considered that my refit cost. As an example, if a boat was 10 years old, I'd add 10% as a refit cost. If a boat was 20 years old, I'd add 20%. Then, to figure out what it would cost to obtain the equipment I needed, I made a list of all the accessories I want to have on a boat and how much those accessories cost. If the listing for the vessel does not specifically state the age and quality of an accessory, then I consider it to be outdated and I include it as part of my startup cost. The thought there is if a boat has had recent rigging or a new motor, then they're 100% going to put that in the listing. If they're unsure of the quality or the quality is low, then they won't mention that in a listing. So to quickly go over my list of boat requirements. Keep in mind this is my list. Depending on where you're going, what you're intending to do, your list may be entirely different. Things that are wants that I'm willing to go without are highlighted in yellow. Some of those are wants because fuel, water tanks that have large capacity, yes, that would be great, but I'm willing to put cans of gas and water or diesel and water up on deck if I have to. I would prefer to have 2 bathrooms, 2 heads, but it's not a requirement. The keel and the skeg-hung rudder, I would really like that, but looking at the overall budget, it might not be in there and I might have to take what I can get. Things that I'm not willing to compromise on, it's got to be aesthetically appealing. I wouldn't live somewhere that I don't want to be, so it's got to be somewhere that I'm comfortable living and that appeals to me when I go home. I've got to have a quality motor. I have to have 2 cabins. I need one for my son and one for my wife and I. Recent rigging, just because it's a sailboat and you want it to go and you want to keep the mast up. A shower, I know there's some YouTubers out there who are cruising with no shower on board, but that's just not for me. Size, I don't think I can meet my requirements in under 36 feet. And then when I go to stow stuff, I don't think there'll be room for 3 people stowing stuff on anything less than a 36. And I just don't want to pay to maintain anything bigger than 50 feet. For the draft, I plan on starting off my cruising in the Caribbean, and less than 6 feet is, while not required, certainly preferred. And then finally, length overall versus length at the waterline. Whenever you go to pay for something on a boat, you pay by the overall size, the length overall. But when you go to live in the boat, your square footage you have to live in depends on the length at the waterline, where the deck or the cabin sole is inside the boat. Well, I don't want to pay a whole bunch of extra that I don't actually have for living space, so I want a boat that's close with length overall to length at the waterline. For my needs list, I know I'm going to get some hate in the comments. I know there's plenty of people living the dream without a life raft, radar, EPIRB, or water maker. My plan is to budget for all of my what I think are needs currently, give it 6 months into the lifestyle, and then decide, reevaluate my list, and then add accessories at that time. But if I don't budget before I go, then I'm out of luck. So here's a quick list of boats that I like that would meet my requirements. I'll stick it in the description in case you want to review, but I'm not going to go into each one, or this video would be 20 minutes long. What I will do is briefly look at 5 example yachts that meet my requirements. First, the Morgan 44 checks all my boxes and does it with style. Amazing aft cabin, larger keel, Skeg-Hun rudder, center cockpit, and an overall beautiful yacht. With a list price of $80K, refit of $27 and $33 for system upgrades, my estimate for getting this yacht to the standard I want is $137,000. Next on the list is the Morgan 461. All the same advantages as the previous yacht, but in a slightly larger package with a lower list cost and more pre-installed equipment included in the deal. This one came in at $103,000, all said and done. The Irwin 37.5 is another yacht that pulls at the heartstrings while ticking all the required boxes. Aft cabin is not as nice as the other examples, but this is also a much shorter yacht at only 37 feet length overall. Yacht, refit, and system upgrade estimate altogether for this yacht runs $77,000. While not classic plastic, the Bavaria 36 will still do the trip and get you where you want to go. While the fin keel and free-hanging rudder are not my preferred option, I'm willing to compromise to get this dream moving. All-in estimate for this example is $88,000. I'm sure I'll get some comment hate for this one, but the Jeanneau 36 ticks all the required boxes. To my mind, it's not the most beautiful yacht on the list, but there's something to be said for having a yacht built this century. All in for this example is $82,000. Final example before we hit the total cost estimate conclusions. The Hunter 380 would be a fine selection for the journey. Not ideal like the Morgan, but serviceable. All in for this example is $94,000. The moment you've all been waiting for, conclusion time. Living expenses of $30K a year work out to $210,000 over 7 years. Adding $30 for the emergency fund and another $30 for the return to land fund takes you to $270,000. The average cost of the yacht, refit, and system upgrades for the 5 examples I looked at was $100,000. This takes us to a grand total of $370,000 I need to start living the dream. One thing I realized after working up the slide was I had forgotten interest. The boat costs are spent prior to departure, but everything else is spent over the 7 years. The non-upfront money can be earning interest while you cruise. At 6% interest, the non-upfront savings on $210,000 will earn $60,000 over 7 years of the voyage. This means earned interest will cover the emergency and return to land funds. We can drop $60,000 off the grand total for a new estimate of $310,000 to get going. I'd love to hear from you all in the comments if I missed anything in my estimates. $310,000 is a lot more than I assumed prior to running the numbers. That means I'll be making these videos for a good while yet. Like and subscribe to be notified when the next one comes out.